I wonder, actually, there's an angle we could talk. So we talked earlier about like all the problems in the West. I wonder if this might actually be like the best Worlds ever for Asian viewership. Like, think about it. They should be super hyped to watch all these playoff games. Every single game has a team in theory that they might want to watch, or one of the major regions is going to watch. So maybe it'll even pump the viewership up. Who knows?
I think it also helps that basically all of the matches I think are going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
And there's like really good storylines. And we haven't gone into the bracket yet, but having the MSI finals be rematched in the quarterfinals is obviously incredibly good for storylines. Having DRX versus EDG, which is not only Deft versus Viper, but Deft versus his old team. Plus, I think either of those teams would have gotten kind of stomped by almost anyone else, except for maybe like DRX versus Rogue would have been. So we actually get a compelling series out of that, which might have been one-sided if it was somewhere else. Now, the problem with that is that it probably makes the semifinal of the winner of that versus the winner of GenG/Dom1 pretty boring. I anticipate if it's GenG or Dom1, they probably just sail through to the finals through that semifinal match. Whereas at least like JDG or Rogue versus T1 or RNG, I think is much more exciting as a potential semifinal matchup. But I think like at least we're pretty much good to get a compelling final out of this.
And for once, I'm not going into Worlds knockouts saying that, hey, in semifinals, we're going to have the matchup we should have had in finals, which was what it was last year and also for MSI. So yeah, I'm hyped. I'm hyped, honestly. It's going to be great. And one of the best draw, I think, in terms of balance and how teams match against each other.
I mean, in my bias, I would have rather had GenG versus EDG and DRX versus Dom1 Kia on the bottom side. If I could reverse those matchups to create a better semifinal, probably would do that. It's going to be really shitty to see either GenG or Dom1 Kia go home after groups, because I think the top 4 teams right now are probably T1, GenG, Dom1, and JDG. And so that would be ideally the kind of semis that you would want.
He's back. He's back, guy. You know what? After all these years away, remember he was in the Overwatch League, and he came back and he was mainly hosting. I had spot of the LCK Monte's back, the full Korean fellatio enthusiast. He just already, after a bunch of BO1s, made 3 Korean teams in his top 4. He literally already just put down 1. They haven't even beaten GenG yet. If they beat GenG, they're just going past DRX EG. No chance for EDG. Reigning world champions. Straight to he's back. He's back, ladies and gentlemen. We got him back. All right. He's fully back.
Look, this is true, but also I'm sick of the LPL homer narratives.
Right, okay.
3 out of the top 4 teams last year were LCK teams, but yet I'm supposed to believe that LPL is just by far stronger. The narratives, oh yeah, Korea just a 1-team region. Oh yeah, 3 out of the top 4 teams. Okay, guys. Like, going to the 5th game in the finals, going to the 5th game at MSI. Korea is so much worse than LPL, of course.
I'm an LCK enjoyer as much as you are, Monte, but reality is that we got stomped so much over the past few years, and I'm just wondering if it's going to be any different this time, because we know, I mean, there's no like one pattern as to why the LCK team have been failing versus the LPL lately, but it's just that in LCK, there's no like real challenge, not challenge, but I mean, they're not challenged in the way they play the game, and they play more reactive when you have the LPL team just bustling and like they don't care about the rules of League of Legends. If they can't pick a fight, they will pick it anyway. And this is what has been like failing for the LCK team so far. And I'm just wondering if they're gonna learn from that, because as of now, I don't see it in T1. I don't see it in GenG either. And no, I mean I don't see it in any of the LCK team. I don't know if they have what it takes to just play differently and learn from the mistakes they've made.
So I will say that was partially facetious.
Okay.
I was playing that.
All right. There you go.
He was sort of playing into his character.
I was playing into the character,
exactly.
but I do think JDG is an exceptional team. I really enjoy watching them play, and I love the fact that they can find these angles to come back from any situation, and they're absolutely one of the top teams. Maybe I would say they probably are the top favorite based on what we've seen at Worlds, just because GenG's week 1 was so poor. I think we saw a lot more from GenG. However, I also know from talking to the teams that GenG was basically just shit stomping everybody in scrims.
Yes.
And the problem is when you come in with a new patch and you're destroying everybody, you actually just don't know what's good in the real matches because you can beat people with anything and people play differently in scrims. You can get a wrong meta read by being too good in scrims. This has happened repeatedly throughout League of Legends history. And I think they showed a lot of good adjustments into the second week of competition. But there are also a lot of asterisks, such as RNG was clearly quite ill during those games. If you looked at the Cavs, they looked like shit. So I'm not gonna read too much into it because RNG was clearly under the weather, was clearly to a certain degree underperforming due to their situation. Whereas GenG, who did test positive, then I guess tested negative and got out of, they were on stage and it seems like they were feeling a lot better. So there have been a lot of mitigating factors surrounded GenG's performance, and certainly they didn't come in as strong as we would have expected. Their first 3 games were pretty ropey, and their last 3 games were dominant, and plus the tiebreaker, those 4 games were dominant, but in a weak group with a sick opponent. So I absolutely think there is a world where Dom1 beats them. Again, because of the matchup. To talk specifically about that matchup, for those of you guys who may not be familiar with what happened in LCK and these team styles, is that the reason why T1 has a favorable matchup versus Dom1, whereas GenG does not, is that Dom1 plays weird shit. The last time they met, there was a Karthus jungle that Canyon nearly won the game for them on Karthus jungle. It turned into an incredibly sloppy, 40-minute game that ended up being kind of the pivotal game in the series. And GenG, they are really technically good. But when you throw weird things at them, you can actually destabilize them. And Dom1 is very, very good at doing that. The thing is that Dom1 is also kind of bad at reading their own win conditions. So in spite of the fact that people would criticize the semifinal that happened between T1 and Dom1, the Heimerdinger bot lane, everything that went down, the Dom1 draft was actually very good. And the progression of their draft to mind game T1 throughout that series was excellent. The thing about T1 is that T1 is really good at reading enemy win conditions. It is harder to fool T1 than it is to fool GenG. It's just that GenG is stronger in playing the GenG style than T1 is playing the T1 style. So if you give T1 weird things and you don't know how to execute, they will find the right bush to hide in. They will run you around the map. They will not let you play to your win conditions, and you can get baited by them really hard. So that was the reason why they lost that game, is because they weren't Dom1 was getting sucked into T1's play style, not actually setting up on objectives with the Heimerdinger and their top Azir and everything like that. And then they were just being basically T1 was making them march to the beat of T1's drum. T1 has a very specific play style at this tournament, which is they've been mostly, except for their last game that they played, been playing pick compositions.
Yep.
And they're really good at doing that. So I think what's dangerous about T1 is they have a different style than every other team at this tournament that we've seen, and they are really good at that style. I was at least encouraged that they played a non-pick composition on their in their last game. Let me pull that one up real quick. Which was EDG when they played Kalista, Soraka, Victor, and it was Zeus bodying Flandre on GP, or with GP rather, in the Maokai matchup. So they have an extremely strong top laner who is probably the leading MVP candidate at Worlds as we head into the bracket stage. But yeah, that's why these matchups are a little weird, and that's why the Dom1 upset could certainly happen.
But
I have
that's
a topic.
the thing,
Go on.
It's, I don't know. I mean, as much as I like pick compositions and playing skirmishes and everything, I think it's much easier to play against a weaker team. And I'm just wondering how they're going to do against RNG when you get Wei, especially, and how he paths in the jungle and how he disregards completely the rules you have in jungle. I'm just wondering how much opportunities they can create in that setting. That's all. And to follow up on the GenG analysis, I agree with you. But Lehans exists, but the issue is that you need to enable ruler, and I feel like Lehens can't play the way he could maybe with another ADC just because Ruler requires such a specific setup to be enabled. So yeah, let's see if they can get away from that also. But there's options for sure.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.